here. Let's stop the music and get to it. Let's see. Oh my goodness, this is. You know what? We'll just let it go ahead and play so it can finish itself. While we're warming up. Everybody start filing in. We're about to kick off the show. All right. Let's see if we can't exit out this bad boy here. And while we're doing that, love technology, right, Annalise?
It's always great when it works.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So, I'm so happy to have you here. And while I work this out and everybody starts following in, we want to get to it. So, Annalise Kruger, oh my goodness, we're going to talk about caregiving this evening for the first 30 minutes, y'all. And then I'm going to carry out the rest of the show on some hot topics. Annalise, while I try to do this technology thing, why don't you kick off by introducing yourself?
Great. Well, thank you, Dr. Cherry, for having me on your podcast tonight. This is fantastic. So, my name is Annalise Kruger, and I am a family caregiver, senior care, dementia, and end of life consultant. I started my company in 2011 and went virtual right away because family caregivers live everywhere and they quickly find themselves kind of in over their head with what to do now with mom and dad or an ill spouse. So I'm happy to be here to talk about just the emotional and financial toll of family caregiving so that if anybody's out there listening to this or watching this podcast, your takeaways will be things that you can implement right away.
Awesome. Awesome. You know, this podcast, Annalise, this episode was inspired by my recent visit with my grandmother. And so my young son, our young son, my wife and I, his name is Lath, and he turned 1 on Friday. And he only has one great grandmother alive on both sides of the family. And it was imperative to us that he meet his, great grandmother and also his great uncle and his great aunt. When my grandmother had told me, she said, she's real faithful, Annalise. So she goes, when are you going to bring Leif to me before I go home to glory? And and she said it just like that too. But it put time in perspective. And it was very critical to us and essential to us that she see him. She's in great health and all that, but be able to see him as a baby. So what that led to me is then we were introduced by a great friend, Keena Pettijohn, and she was like, "You got to meet Annalise." And she talks about caregiving all the time. And I've done some research on long-term care and support services. And so with all that, and I'll say this, and I'll turn it over to you, which a conversation between, and I'll leave it high level because I don't want my grandmother watching the podcast and telling you told them all my business, right? But we just talked about, legacy, how she wants her affairs taken care of, right? And there's an interesting dynamic of, my father, his sister and the brother taking care of, my grandmother and the different ways that they do, right? So let's kick it off with this. I mean, the caregiving toll, or emotional and financial. Let's talk about with the emotional. What's the toll that it has on the family?
Pretty significant. So, the people who had major strokes last Thursday didn't wake up thinking, oh, I think I'm going to have a major stroke today, and let's just stress test our finances and stress test our family relationships, right? But adult kids often find themselves thrust into the role of family caregiving, and they don't often feel equipped, ready. They're usually blindsided by everything. They're like, well, we've never talked about the what whens of aging. I don't know what my parents have in order for power of attorney, living will, if they have long-term care insurance. I don't know if my dad was a veteran and if he qualifies for any benefits. So there's all this angst, and not everybody is really equipped to be a caregiver. Not everybody has that type of personality. Not everybody has that type of relationship with that care recipient. Maybe you find yourself taking care of someone who really wasn't maybe the best parent to you, and now all of a sudden you're thrust into taking care of someone who you just may not feel very close to, but you feel obligated, right? And so that emotional toll can add up pretty quickly if you don't have an aging plan. Meaning it's different taking care of someone with a broken hip who might be back to baseline in 6 to 8 weeks, but it's a totally different ballgame if you're taking care of someone who has a chronic disease like dementia, which can be an up to 30-year disease progression, or Parkinson's or MS or ALS. That's a 24/7 care journey, and when people get thrust into that, they find in time themselves in over their head with just how much care that person needs, or how much attention, or multiple doctor's appointments and coordinating care and having to miss work, or having that husband give you the cold shoulder because you have to fly from New York to Austin, Texas yet again this month because mom fell again. So that's that emotional turnover, that emotional toil can really derail your emotional health, your finances, your career, your relationships to the care recipient, to your loved ones at home, and to your siblings.
Yeah. Oh, there's so much to unpack there. I saw a 60 Minutes episode. Did you see this one? I think it was maybe 7 years ago or something to this effect, where they were tracking the last 10 or 15 years of a couple, and it was a husband and wife, and then I believe the wife had, the early on stage, dementia, and she was still able to speak when they first started. And, both of them look like you were when the presidents, they start, they're young,
Yeah,
right? They got their faces glowing and all this, right? And then, right, 4 or 8 years later, you see all the presidents, they got the
that
nice hair, they got 7, 8, 9 bags underneath their eyes, right? All this. And, and to take their situation seriously and not lightly, they were just rah rah. We're going to support each other. We have
mhm,
a somewhat of a plan, right? And then uh, I think they checked in about 5 years later, and the toll, and this could be either spouse one, spouse two, but
yeah,
the husband was like, "Oh, it's getting real difficult now. It accelerated faster than it did than we thought." And
mhm,
then I think it was a couple years later where he started suffering as well. That's tough because as you know, but a lot of folks may not know, there's a confusion of long-term care, LTC, and long-term care support and services, and how high the percentages are that people will need some sort of support and care that may not be administered by
mhm.
professionals. So, and did you happen to catch that? But I know you know stories like that all the time.
I did not, but that's because I also live it every day.
Yeah.
The thing is when people get when you get that crisis call that your dad just had a stroke and he's in the hospital and big decisions need to be made quickly, that puts everybody in an emotional tailspin. It's like they find out they're ill prepared, they don't know what documents are in order because they never talked about this type of what whens of aging, or what happens if this happens to me, what is our family plan? What's our aging plan? But also, it seems like, as siblings, one person will kind of take the bull by the horns, so to speak, and like take charge. And they just kind of assume that their siblings will also like help them. And that often is not the case.
Right.
One person, the brunt of the caregiving falls on shoulders of that one person. And it again, they find themselves resentful and angry when they don't have enough of a plan in place. But when we talk about, only children, if parents only had one child, they don't have the support from siblings or other people. So they feel very much overwhelmed all of the time because all of the decisions are up to them if both parents become incapacitated.
Yeah, most definitely. And so there's a couple things there, and I'm sure a lot of the watchers, and particularly in your business, you see this every day. But many folks just have family in this particular predicament. And you mentioned your word, the resentment. I've seen it to where when there's no plan, uh, folks have different talent capabilities. They have different They have different capacities. You have location flexibility. You have folks that have careers, and those that may have a little bit more flexibility. And then when roles seem to either not be defined or they define themselves without the lack of conversation, then now the conversation is thrust upon folks, and they're like, "Well, I'm doing this, you're not doing this," so on and so forth. When a conversation could have, prepared, folks for their roles and capacity and what to contribute.
The thing is, though, that Fam so some of the mistakes that families make globally are that they just assume that they have more time to figure out, well, mom and dad are doing fine right now. Well, that's great. That's the time to work with us and put that plan in place and have these conversations when emotions aren't high and time isn't limited, right? Like the last thing you want to do is start making big decisions quickly when you're in a state of crisis. When emotions are high, time is limited, and the hospital says you got to figure out what you're going to do because we're discharging tomorrow, or the care facility says your parent needs more care than what we can provide. You need to move them to the next higher level of care. And so, even if families did try to have their own family meetings, 92% of my families come to us in crisis mode, caregiver burnout. They are emotionally fried. They just don't have a lot of grit left. They're like, I've already been taking care of my parents for 5 years, and maybe they have a special needs child that they're already taking care of, or their spouse is sick. And so, there's only so many hours in the day, and we all have so much energy to give. But we also know that when families don't have an aging plan in place and there's a lot of assumptions, well, of course we'll all work together, and of course I'll take time off work and give you a break so that you don't get burned out, sister. Well, guess what? That doesn't always happen. And so while 92% of our families come to us in crisis mode, and it's usually from dementia because they find out that, dementia is much more involved and much more time consuming and energy draining than what they realized. And so the emotional turmoil of that is they don't have a lot of energy left to give. They don't have a lot of bandwidth. The caregiver has already, isolated themselves because they can't leave their loved one home by themselves. They no longer go to church, or they don't go to Bible study or get their hair done. The isolation part is also a huge impact. But we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the toll on the primary caregiver, who might be that 85-year-old mother trying to take care of the 88-year-old father who has advanced dementia. We know that 63% of primary family caregiver spouses over the age of 60 have a 62 to 63% higher mortality rate because they start to neglect their own care needs or their own medical appointments or their own health or their own surgeries. They put off surgeries. It's just like, well, I can't be laid up with a rotator cuff procedure because who's going to take care of, Marvin for that 3 months, that 3 month recovery time. So that emotional turmoil is significant. Or think about if you're the son or the daughter and you're trying to hold down your job or your business. And so your typical lunchtime is spent calling your dad to make sure he's okay. Did you take your medicine? Did you get to the doctor's appointment this morning? And then in time, when you can't get a hold of them because they don't answer, you're like, oh my gosh, did they fall? Did they wander away? Did did they have a stroke? Are they, so all that emotional angst, it's just not viable and it's not sustainable to always be worried. And that's what happens when you don't have a plan in place.
Yeah. I mean, it's just so much. And also, too, I mean, when you talk about some of all of us, right? You're talking about an 83, 84 standard, well, not standard living, but longevity for women, and then another 81, maybe even less. So that because that increased a little bit because of COVID. But you're talking about 78 for men. The I guess, the women bear the brunt of the care first because they're male. If it's a male and a female spouse, then they're carrying the brunt of that quite early. I mean, because the statistics are that folks are going to need care that last 3 years,
Yeah.
for some sort of care the last 3 years. I think the statistic is something like 70%, 75%. But that's just the last 3 years of end of life care. That doesn't say anything about the previous 10, to where it may be small signs, right? And small things to deal with, but there's small compounds to be huge. Yeah.
Right. Well, and the thing is that, you know, and I say this literally every day, that denial is a great place to be until you can't be there anymore. Like, we all need to just kind of wake up and realize and just know this is going to be a little bit of tough love here, but none of us get stronger. None of us get more able bodied. None of us get more independent. And none of us get more cognizant as we age. So, what I see families doing is missing the red flags that things aren't going well. And then that's when denial kicks in. If your parent is losing weight, if they're wandering out of the house and the police or the neighbors are calling you and saying, "Hey, John, just letting you know your dad was out wandering naked again this afternoon. We had to bring him back to his house." Or if your loved one is in and out of the hospital, if your loved one has been scammed, if your loved one is leaving the stove on, if your loved one is in and out of the urgent care, if your loved one is getting lost while they're driving, those are all red flags. Or if they're taking medicine, if they're not taking their medicine correctly, you can't assume that they're taking their medicine correctly. So for those adult kids who are listening to this, those warning signs are always there. You just have to know what they are, but you also have to act on them and say, "Look, I'm worried. Things don't look like they're going very well. We need to be putting an aging plan in place and understanding what home care options are available, understanding the cost of care." My clients who are trying to age in place at home, one companion 24/7, 24/7 hour, 24/7 a day. Um, because when you're saying that you want to age in place at home, that means that you want to bring in all care so that you can stay there and die at home. Because we don't get healthier as we age, we know that we're going to need care unless you just have a heart attack and don't wake up that next day. That happens to like this many people. So we need to plan for worst case scenario, right? So knowing that home care, depending on where you live, can be $30,000 to $40,000 per month in 24/7 care, and that's just one caregiver, one companion. If you have two aging parents and they need two or three caregivers because they're obese or they have dementia, it adds up very quickly, and Medicare does not pay for this. So we need to look at, when we're talking about an aging plan, what are the current care options based on what you can afford? If you are living on Social Security, you're obviously not going to be able to afford to age in place at home. If you have $1 million and half of that is your house, we need to be strategic, because what is going to be your aging in place at home care budget so that you don't break the bank and now can't qualify financially to get into a care community. And so we've got to be having these conversations about the current care costs, current care options based on what you can afford, but also looking at care communities, even though people don't want to move in them. The reality is that very few people can actually age in place at home because of the care costs or because of the shortage of quality healthcare workers. So we've got to be out there. We've got to be doing the tours of these different care facilities. Put yourselves on the waiting list of two or three of them so that if things go sideways at home, I call it a house of cards. So
Mhm.
if things go sideways, you've got a higher probability of getting into at least a care community that you've toured multiple times through the years. You have a quasi relationship and a quasi comfort level that if I can't stay at home or my loved one can't stay at home, at least I'm on the waiting list. The reality is, many of these care communities can have a 2, 3, 4, 5 year waiting list. Some of them you have to move in at the independent living level of care range, and you can't move in at memory care or assisted living. Some of them, you all have to financially, physically, behaviorally, and cognitively qualify to get in. You can't just move in because you want to. There's a whole process that has to be done, and families don't know that. So when we talk about the financial toll of family caregiving, a lot of families, a lot of adult kids are financially pitching in to help their parents be safe at home, whether the kids are paying for the home care or the kids are the assisted living because they keep stepping away from their business or they keep stepping away from their job. I've got many of my clients when they call for their 30-minute consult, the caregivers are crying, they're overwhelmed, they're burned out, they have anxiety, they have depression, and financially, my typical son or daughter is spending $25,000 the year before in just emergency airfare. Because if you have to start going down every 2 weeks or every month, airfare is not $69 on Frontier when you get that crisis call. It's 1,200, 1,800 bucks at a pop. And that's just airfare. That's not missed work. That's not if you are a realtor and you can't sell a house if you're not there to show it. If you're in sales, you can't make sales if you're not there to meet your numbers. So family caregivers, the financial cost of not having an aging plan is they're retiring early, which affects their own financial portfolio. And a lot of them are saying, I didn't retire to go take care of mom because she has dementia. They retired because they wanted to spend time with family and travel and grandkids, right? Or stepping away from their work. A lot of my clients have burned through all of their FMLA. They have no PTO left, no paid time off, and they've burned through their FMLA. So it is a major financial cost that these caregivers are spending trying to help aging parents or trying to help ill spouses because they don't know about what an aging plan is.
Yes, for sure. I mean, there was a lot there, for sure. One, I'd like to start off with, well, continue with because you pivoted quite nicely with the financial toll, right? And I share with my clients a lot, which, I service the Gen X, and right now they are the current
Yeah.
sandwich generation. And they are having to not only take care of adult children that may be in their house, but also aging parents. And so the financial toll is not just on the aging parent that may or may not have their finances to secure their care, right? So they're having to dilute their finances. If they have a million or two, because the highest cost right now, the average cost of care, as you well know, it's in the $130,000 range for full care per year,
Yeah.
and depending where you are, and that's just average. It could be higher in those higher cost of living states. And then when you come or adjust the care downwardly to where you're not having full on care, like you said, someone in the home, then you're talking about perhaps 50 or 60. So it's still significant. So there's a financial toll for the person that needs care, if they don't, because if they don't, then they got to go to Medicaid. And then the folks that's currently Gen X, they're having to their well-being is affected because they're not like you said, they're traveling much. They're traveling to go see the people that they need to care for, rather than Honolulu or something like that. And they're also not attending to their careers, either corporate or business. So the financial toll is double sided.
Well, if you think about family legacy, no parents or very few parents want to, you know, they tell me that they don't want to be a burden on their kid. They want to age in place at home, but they don't want to be a burden on their kids. But guess who is always calling us for a consult? It's the adult kids, because the adult kids have become the assisted living for their parents, and they know that if they didn't keep coming over to do whatever it is, bathing, dressing, shopping for them, setting up their pills, that's all caregiving, and they know that if they weren't the ones doing that, their parents would have to be in a care facility. And so, you know, think about how do you want to remember these last few years as a family, feeling like you're burdening your kids if you're the parents, or if you're the adult kids, do you want to remember the last few years of your parents' life feeling angry, resentful, bitter? No parent wants to know that their kids will never speak to them again because the aging process is bumpy, and you would hope that families would do this in grace and work as a team, but they often don't. And even the closest knit families, even if going into this aging and dementia and caregiving journey, even if they were close knit. That doesn't mean that they're going to make it out on the other side being close knit. It doesn't take long for wedges to happen in those relationships. Like I said, 92% of our families are onboarded in crisis. 85% of those families, I'm doing mediation with them because by the time they come to us, they're burned out, they're overwhelmed, and they are not getting along at all. You're on mute.
You mentioned a couple of things. Thank you. I've been running. My nose has been running for
I know.
about a day, right? So I was like, I didn't want to sneeze in the microphone. But you mentioned a couple of things, which the key word is dignity and legacy. Having these conversations early at how people want to be cared for, so there's no confusion uh, with the caregivers and the recipient. Like you said, do people want to age in place, or do they want some care? What is the expectation? What is
Right.
the expectation? I mean, for myself, I'm already thinking I'm late turn one, and I think I'll be 86 when he's oh no, when he's 40, and I'll be
Yeah.
76 when he's 30. I'm like, look, I'm hoping to have enough money to where I don't expect anybody to have to stop their lives for me during that time. That said, it may not be that way. And how do people want
Mhm.
to age with dignity and also perhaps have more, finances to pass on to legacy and also to carry on their human
Right.
legacy, right? And there might not be enough time during that time that you're receiving care in order to establish either a financial legacy going forward or the family legacy to talk about history and things of that nature.
Yeah. I think too what's important is, when we also talk about the emotional and financial cost of caregiving without an aging plan, which is, what we do is aging planning, is you get thrust into that role of caregiving because of a stroke or dementia progression or a motor vehicle accident. Nobody plans on getting T-boned at the intersection on their way home, but guess what? That happens to millions of people every year. So when we talk about angst, there's also, um, there's importance in making sure that you have your living will, no matter how old you are. I don't care if you're 25 years old or 90 years old, living will, power of attorney, and make sure that you dust these documents off and make sure that it's like, okay, do the people that I named as my agent for finances and healthcare, do I still like them? Do I still trust them? Are they still competent? Do I still have a relationship with them? Long-term care insurance. A lot of my clients bought it 30 years ago. They haven't looked at it since. Well, now that they're needing care, they're like, oh, what does it even cover? They don't know. And having your accounts, your passwords, and teaching having these family meetings about what you have in place. Who are your doctors? What medications do you take? Who's your financial advisor? Who's your accountant? Who's your estate planner? Where are these documents? What bills do you pay out of which accounts? Which ones do you have set up on auto pay? Because I'm telling you, all of this is
Yes.
gold nuggets because this is the stuff that can tear those families apart because you're like, well, I don't know. Our family's never talked about it. Well, now that dad had a stroke and he can't tell you any of this information or his dementia progressed, now kids waste. And I say waste because if you were proactive, we'd have the grab and go binder stuff all put together.
Right.
What's the business succession plan? A lot of my clients have multiple properties. The kids have no idea. Who's the property manager? Where are these properties? So, your business succession plan. If you have a pet, what's the pet plan if you end up in the hospital or on hospice? What's their medication? Who's their vet? If you have a special needs child, we have a very robust section in the grab and go binder for special needs. So, getting all of this stuff buttoned up, because then when you do get that crisis call of a stroke or dad wandered out of the house or your wife got hit by a semi, you don't now have to waste weeks to get all of this information compiled, or just as bad, have to pay expensive guardianship and conservatorship fees, legal fees, because you didn't have simple documents in order of naming who's going to be your decision maker. So part of this is just being an adult, you know, getting everything in order. A lot of people spend more time planning vacations or planning other things versus like what to do while you're alive and getting all of your documents in order.
Oh, yeah, I mean, you couldn't have said it any better. I mean, I'm a big champion of estate planning, but a big part of estate planning is expectancy planning. We're not talking about expecting a child. We're talking about expecting what to expect for his legacy. What to expect to your finances. What to expect about decisions. What to expect about who's doing what. And so the expectancy planning
Hmm.
helps avoid all of this erroneous thought process or approach to finding the digital assets, the house, the decisions, the medical, the financial. A lot of times, the financial and medical person is not the same, right? End of life care, all of this. What are the expectations? So that's a large part of the estate planning.
And the expectations for care as well, because even though parents say they don't want to be a burden on their kids, they see their kids taking time off work. They see their kids having to take them to 6 doctor appointments a month. That's all caregiving. And so that's part of that legacy, that family legacy, the relationships, right? So we talk about, well, what are your caregiver roles right now? What do you want to take off your caregiver plate, so to speak, so that we can outsource that and hire professionals to do that? You don't need to be doing housekeeping, or maybe you don't need to be doing cooking or shopping. Let's put a solution in place, and let's like divvy out the list of who can do what.
Hmm.
Which ones can other family members help with? Which ones can we just outsource to a professional, and other resources that we can utilize to make everyone's life easier, but just as important, making sure that our loved ones are safe, happy, and have the best quality of life possible. The only way to do that is through putting an actual aging plan in place.
Most definitely, most definitely. Well, advisors like me are successful when they have partners,
Yeah.
financial advisors, right? We have estate planning and expecting an aging plan
Yeah.
advisors like yourself. That helps our clients be successful. So I'm so glad to know your resources, and I know we'll be doing future care for some of my clients for sure. Thank you for coming on the show and sharing your expertise. What are some of the key elements that we may not have mentioned, or do you want to highlight as we exit the show?
One thing I want to highlight, because whenever I do these speaking engagements or podcasts or like book signings, when I'm doing my book, is everybody's like, okay, well, this is great. I love this, but how do I get mom and dad on board
Mhm.
of having a consult with me, or at least having at least a starter, what I call a starter conversation? These are questions you can ask your parents or your spouse if you're caring for an ill spouse. Is it important for you to have a say in what happens to you as you age? Is it important for you to have the most independence as possible, to be the most independent and have the most dignity possible? Who's going to say no to that? Is it important for you that you are safe and have the best quality of life possible? The answers are always going to be yes if you ask it that way. You can say, Mom and Dad, we love you, as a family, we love you, but we are in uncharted territory. We need help with putting an aging plan in place, and we need someone to help us with these family meetings. Because even if the family does try to have a family meeting, if they don't know what they're doing because they don't understand dementia, or they think that assisted living is the exact same thing as memory care, or they think that Medicare is going to pay for 24/7 home care, there's too much there's too much misinformation or assumptions out there for families to do all of this aging planning on their own. And I promise you, Google will only get you so far. And neighbor Joe, what he did with his mom, will only get you so far. So if you want to actually work with a professional, just like you work with a professional financial advisor to lead you down the path of,
Yeah.
success, we do that except for family caregiving, aging, senior care options, and dementia progression.
Awesome, awesome. That compassionate questioning and compassionate care is what I heard.
Right.
Oh, thank you for sharing. Annalie, where can people find you?
People can find me on my website is carerightinc.com. That's CARERIGHTINC.com. You can also go on LinkedIn under Anna Lee Kruger, KRUGER. Or you can send me an email at wecare@carerightinc.com.
Oh, wow. You can find Annalie everywhere, and we'll try to get those into the show notes as well. And the replay will be available for everyone. So go find Annalie.
And essentially, if you just Google Anna Lee Kruger, all sorts of good things are going to come up because I'm a very uh, public advocate for family caregivers. So I'm all over the internet in a way that makes my parents actually proud.
Right, right. My niece told me one time, she said, Uncle Preston, you're Googleable. You
Yeah.
know,
Yes.
that was like, damn, I guess that's a thing. So Annalie, you're Googleable.
I'm Googleable. One last thing, and it's
Sure.
shameless, but
Yes,
if you
do,
want
please
to
do.
a good starting point really for families if you want to at least broach or learn a little bit about aging and caregiving. I wrote the book. It's on Amazon, The Invisible Patient, the emotional, financial, and physical toll on family caregivers. It's got a bench on it because it's a lonely journey when you don't have enough supports and a plan in place. And it is jam packed with literally checklists, scripts. I mean, there's no fluff in this book.
Love it. Love it.
So,
I
you
need to
can get
pick
that
up.
on Amazon.
I got with the little Kindle, I think it is. I need to folks, go pick up the book. And as a fellow author, hey, go pick up the book. And also, too, pick it up because of the conversations that we had today. Caregiving toll, emotional, financial, care, conversations, dignity, and legacy. And then how to ask, how to act, how to engage, checklists, all in Annalee's book. And then we have some at Concurrent Wealth Management as well. Annalee, thank you so much. I really appreciate all the knowledge that you dropped today.
I appreciate being on your podcast. And, for families that are listening to this and you're still stuck on like, okay, how do I broach this? Just leverage this podcast and play it for your family and say, this is the podcast that I listened to. And it got me thinking that we haven't really put any kind of plan in place. We've never really talked about the what whens of aging. Let's as a family start these conversations now.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we'll have you on in some months to come and hear about some more stories and some more action items, and we'll cover that in the future. Annalee, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day.
All
Thank
right.
you.
All right, folks. Oh my goodness, that was fantastic. I mean, everyone that has family and elderly, whether it be grandparents, parents, aunts, uncles, or it could even be if you don't have those type of relationships. Maybe you've probably seen it on a movie or two. Uh, Aging care, elderly care is such an emotional topic and a financial topic as well. They're inseparable, and it's a heart, it's the mind, it's the pocketbook. Some of it's unexpected. However, getting out in front of some of these areas or many of these areas, and as Annalee mentioned, and we share with our clients, is that checklist is long. And when you're in the midst of the actual care in of itself, then that it's hard to give the care and plan the care at the same time. So fantastic. Run that back. We're going to pivot a little bit. I'm going to finish out the show solo and go into a couple of topics that are top of mind. And yes, sometimes aging caregiving can be a somber topic, but now we're going to pivot over to a little bit more energetic topic. So one of the topics, oh my gosh, y'all, we got two of them to talk about, which is Warren, Mr. Warren Buffett, and the Berkshire shareholder meeting that took place earlier this week. Fantastic. Mr. Buffett is retiring, right? And with that, we have a legend that's riding off into his own sunset. And so often, when we hear about finances, it's what would Buffett do, or what is Buffett doing? And then he's long had some fantastic advice about personal finances and investing over his many, many, many years. And there's a couple of things that I wanted to highlight from the shareholder meeting, and also just over. It's impossible to cover all his, his quotes, right? But there are a couple of things I want to point out about Mr. Buffett. First of all, just a legend, right? I want to give all credit due, because a couple of things I'm about to say is not uh, a slant at Mr. Buffett, because he's been doing great in investing. It's proven. His legacy is set in stone. He's had an impact on culture and finances, the way people go about their finances, and just America and world in general. So kudos for all of what he's done with his life and how he's impacted folks. Um, Also, too, on the flip side of that, there are folks that take some of his words out of context and apply some of what he says either wrongly or incorrectly. And here's one. I talk about a lot with folks about how they live their lifestyle. All right. I'm a big fan of being in the airport and keeping your eye on your own luggage. And you hear them, they say, keep your eye on your own luggage, right? Or the Kentucky Derby was just this weekend, and you had the horses, right? When they're racing, they have their horse blinders on so they won't look left or right, right? And so often, there's lifestyle shame and, lifestyle judgment, and folks be looking into pocket watching and having some sort of morality play on how people spend their well-being. Well, first of all, I want to go with with how folks travel, particularly in their cars. Me and my wife were just talking about this today, because it's time for us to buy a new car. Our son is 1 year old, and we've had our car for some time now. It used to be luxury; it's still a little bit luxury, but it's time to buy another use asset. Now there is an appreciating asset, but when you say use asset, that means it has a useful life. Using accounting terms, how long is that, and how long are you going to use that asset in order to enhance and serve your lifestyle? And so many folks have a misguided approach to transportation. First of all, it's preference, is what you need for your household, and a whole bunch of other things. And a lot of folks say that Mr. Buffett, and he is a frugal person, and they take this out of context a little bit too, because I guarantee you he's not living hand to mouth, and he doesn't live uncomfortable, right? So he has this jet. It's called Indispensable now. I think he still has it, and it used to be called Indefensible, right? And when he bought it, it was like a couple $1,000,000, I believe, when he bought it. It's worth more now, but he wanted to justify having a jet, because it's well known that Mr. Buffett drives a modest car. I think it was a Cadillac for a whole years, but still a nice Cadillac. All right, but he still owned a jet, right? So because that's the way he travels, it increased his well being of life, right? So thus the name change from indefensible to indispensable, because some things in our life, if we can afford them, our plan is right, and we have the means to, because uh, living below your means is different than living within your means, right? Because if you can live within your means, right, you're still within your means, and means differently to other folks, because people's pockets are different, right? So, but with that, uh, folks sometimes misapply things that they hear or things that they see, and call it gospel, right? And so we have to take things in context and know that, yes, living within your means doesn't mean you have to live below your means. And also, too, frugal means different to different folks, because their pockets are different and their lifestyle and preferences are different. All right, Mr. Buffett's been flying all over the world his whole life, right? So of course he wants there's a modest car there, right? But he has a jet, right? So that's one thing. Secondly, there was a quote that was in the show, right? And when he was doing the Berkshire shareholder meeting, and this one got taken out of context as well. So here's the quote. The quote was, and this was to long term investing, right? Because that's what Mr. Buffett's been a long time. I'm a fan of it too. Have a long term investing horizon. And, I mean, obviously, you have a short term. You may have some money on the side or on your brokerage account or something like you want to trade or do some concentrated investing. Fantastic, right? But along the way, we've had the first 100 days of this administration. We've had different events here recently. You had COVID. You had this year's temporary shock. You've had .com. You've had the financial crisis, right? We always have geopolitical and political risk. So there's a way to navigate the market long term. And even across those events, even though we had a quote unquote lost decade in the 2000s with a 60/40 portfolio, um, over time, long term investing works. Now, you can also engage in some pivoting during that time and be flexible, right? Some people push back on raising cash or having some preserving and protecting cells so you can raise some cash during this period, right? So the quote was, "What has happened? Let me see here. What has happened? What has happened in the 30 to 45 days, 100 days, wherever you want to pick? Whatever the period has been, is really nothing." And so let me read that again. All right. What has happened in the last 30, 45 days, 100 days, whenever you want to pick, whatever this period has been, is really nothing. And it was taken as a champion of being long-term investing because, 30, 45, 100 days is a blip, in a 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40-year period. And he's for sure correct on that. And overall, history has shown us this too. Also, though, at the same time, right? Mr. Buffett, as far as the Berkshire Hathaway strategy, record reserves was announced during that time. So, record cash reserves of $347 billion, $347 billion of cash reserve due to, or it's, reflecting on, some economic and global uncertainties during this time, right? You have companies not giving guidance during this time. And there's some folks that are going to be doing some selling. You have some CEOs announcing that they're going to be doing some selling, right? And folks are not investing. Companies are not giving guidance going forward. And also, not investing into large projects during this time. So, Berkshire's record cash holdings of 347 billion, it says, it's okay to pivot. And no, the 100 days have just not been nothing. And also, too, capacities are different. Like, for instance, I like to share with folks all the time, and it says, what would Buffett do? And I'm like, you're not Warren Buffett. Him and Berkshire Hathaway have different risk capacities, time horizons, and the like, which other folks don't have. Now, long-term investing, value investing, buying, positions at discount, all that's valid. But when he's talking about buying value positions, obviously he owns stock like Apple and so on and so forth. All right, Mr. Buffett is buying like a train, railroad, right? So he's buying transportation. That's how he buys transportation. He's not buying like Ford or something to that effect, right? He's buying like the whole railroad, right? And so he has a longer time horizon, different risk tolerance, different risk capacity because it's endless. It's kind of like an endowment fund. And being able to, buy companies at such a large discount because, he is the oracle of information, right? So yes, buy things on sale for, your own individual portfolio over time. That helps when we have pullbacks, corrections and the like. Long-term investing, all that's good, right? But it's also key to think about your own capacity. Can you not make any slight pivots and have some cash on hand for times of uncertainty? Not panicking and taking money all out of the market or anything to this effect, right? But also, positioning oneself to preserve and protect, and during a time of turmoil or uncertainty. So it's okay to have 6 to 9 to, perhaps 18 months of cash on hand, right? It won't be $347 billion, but it'll be something that's within your purview, not others' purview. So the 30, 45, 100 days, nothing as as Mr. Buffett said, in the short term, historically, yes. In the context of 10 years, 20 years, and the like, sure. All right. But that doesn't mean that Berkshire didn't do any pivoting. All right. They've they announced that they have trimmed some of their position in Apple, which is probably gains in that portfolio. And they have this record breaking amount of cash, almost $350 billion during that time. So although it's nothing, quote unquote, there has been some pivoting, all right, which that you can take to your plan, which is okay to pivot and also think about your own capacity and the like. So a couple of things there that I'd like to share about, the cultural and even investing impact of Warren Buffett. And largely, like I said, I totally give and the respect is due. I'm more talking about how folks use, how he goes about investing and some of the lessons that he's taught over the years and shifting them a little bit in order to fit their narrative. If you look at it another way, and it's like, well, Dr. Cherry, that's what you're doing right now. And I just read you some figures, right? Facts don't lie. Just like ball don't lie. I think it was Rasheed Wallace. He shot a free throw one time, and no, I think the other people were shooting a free throw, and they missed it. He was like, ball don't lie. That means there wasn't no foul, right? Same thing with some of these pivoting in portfolios and time horizons. And yes, there's a lot more folks that have a lot more capacity to be able to shake off 100 days or 45 days of uncertainty, or maybe even 6 months or 9 months or 18 months. And even some of my high income clients, right? They're not just buying and holding it, doing tactical shifts and, raising some funds in order to preserve and protect, right? So 350 billion, couple of jets, right? So, you can live your lifestyle how you want. And sometimes these events are more than just nothing. But overall, yes, long-term mindset and also some short-term concentration when you could take it and buying some things on sale, right? All right, so that's what I wanted to talk about with Mr. Buffett. Let's talk about something else here. Oh my goodness, y'all. Speaking of pivoting, Gen X, I did this podcast a while back, and it said, I did a podcast with my parents, and it said, are you ruining your finances for your adult children? It was my most viral episode, y'all. So go check that out. Is Gen X ruining? Right? It's like the Family Guy, right? You ruined. You can say ruined, right? Oh man, it was Brian and I think the dog or something like that. Say ruined. Why do you put so much emphasis on the you, right? But anyway, yes. Are you ruining your finances, right, for your adult children? A lot of people chimed in and was like, maybe we're providing too much support for our adult children. I know that, life may be a little bit tougher nowadays because of higher prices and the like, but, there's 30, 35-year-old children living in their parents' homes and the like, right, trying to discover themselves. And I heard so much. Go back to the episode and look in the comments about the different perspectives on this. And what has brought me back to this point? Well, here recently, there is some information. There was a survey done, and it listed the top 10 jobs that Gen Z won, where we're talking about adult children, right, y'all? Top 10 jobs that Gen Z wants to be, right? And a lot of Gen Xers have Gen Z children, okay? So once you see this, let's see, you got 32% want to be a YouTuber, right? 21% want to be a TikTok creator. So that's 53% right there wanting to be content. So over half, okay? 15% sports athlete, 16% artist, 17% entrepreneur, mobile app video game developer, 19%, doctor, 20%, professional online streamer, 15%, musician, 14%, and a teacher, 14%. All right. So when you're talking about content creators, YouTube at 32, TikTok 21, so that's 53, online streamer, another 15, 64, 68. All right. Right off the top, there's not enough of those jobs, and those are unicorns. By the way, you can do it. Yes, you can do it. But just like athlete and artist, that's another almost 30%. So and then doctor and nurse is doctor/nurse. Doctors, that takes a lot of commitment to get there. So yes, you can do it. That's the most realistic one out there because at least you have some sort of proven history there, right? So if you back out just teacher and doctor and nurse, that's 34%. That means 66% are probably probabilistic, right? Are you talking about probabilities? Impossible. Not impossible, but highly, highly unsuccessful. They have high barriers to entry. Athlete, you must have some sort of talent and commitment that you committed to, right? uh, YouTube and all this streaming and content and everything like that. Artists, right? Uh, we have a student loan crisis right now because there was a lot of choice on a non-performing degree, right? So you're talking 60 to 70% of YouTube creators or content creators. There's not that much talent out there, y'all. I know I'm on here doing the thing, right? But to actually make it now, if you have a profession, now see, I have a profession that's attached to content creating, right? So something's already been established there, right? I'm an advisor, a wealth advisor. I'm a college professor. I mean, there's some meat on the bone right there, right? But coming out the gate and wanting to be a content creator, and this was a large poll, so the sample size was big. I got to look at it again. But when you have 70% of a representative survey, of the entire generation wanting to be some sort of content creator, that's that's more than fairly unrealistic, and we have to look at that more. And as a college professor, along with being a wealth advisor, all right, I remember my parents told me the truth. And, I played football for a little bit. I played basketball, played tennis. And my dad was a superstar football player. And he was like, son, this ain't it for you. So you got to keep it real. Here's another thing about Gen X. Gen Z, expected salaries coming out of the gate or as graduating, they expect almost $100,000. $100,000. Can you believe that? That's nowhere near the average coming out of the undergrad. And some of the higher salaries pull this up. It's like 68, almost 70,000. All right. Which they believe they simply can't make it on that. Right. And look, I started out with his salary. I know I sound like the uncle or the dad or something. Oh, I hiked up 20, hills of snow to get into the thing, right? I can actually claim as a Gen Xer, I rode the yellow bus instead of getting dropped off, right? During your early periods of your careers, you just have to show some resilience and make some adjustments. And I get wanting to be, help out, adult children. I was helped out a couple of times. I don't deny that. But I was out there already, I was paying a lot out of pocket, everything. There was one time the only thing I didn't pay was rent. Everything else, I paid everything else, right? And then I had a plan to get out because I wasn't going to be living up in my parents' house just willy-nilly and scot-free. I think my mom and dad said, if you're living better than I am in my own house, then, we got a problem, right? So when we talk about the relation between Gen X and Gen Z, and I might get on this about another show, expectations from Gen Z and what Gen X are doing about it, just trying to coach some resiliency and dialing back, maybe unprobabilistic expectations. All right, y'all. It's Sunday evening. This is our show. Tune in next week. We drop it like it's hot. Drop it like it's hot. We always keep it hot on the show. We're going to be going live every Sunday. I'm glad you're tuning in. All right. See you soon. Cheers.